yesterday afternoon. And it was like your abatement, proceedings came up for this property and very quickly. The abatement proceeding that my temper has with a solid waste issue. It just sounds like it's gonna come to us as a hearing.
I'm going to call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for October 20th, 2022. It is 10:02 in the morning. And Christian, would you please lead us in the flag salute? Thank you. And just as a reminder, all county buildings will be participating in the Great Oregon Shakeout Earthquake Drill, which will take place promptly at 10:20. The BOC session will be recessed to allow for staff to participate in the drill, and we will reconvene the session at its conclusion. And Ken, I don't know if you want to just clarify what happens at 10:20, where certain people need to go.
Well, it's part of the evacuation. When the drill starts, when the notice goes out, we just need to give it a minute and then we'll evacuate the building, and we're going to ask everyone who's here in the public to go out the front doors. And there'll be an assembly area out in front of the courthouse, and then the commissioners and staff will go out this door and assemble over by the statue.
Okay. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, perfect. Let's see. Item C is our calendar session. I did add a couple things. There's a 4-H award ceremony on Monday night at the Grand Ballroom in McMinnville. So I'll be presenting an award there. I'm not sure if others will be. And then we have a DCI tour that is scheduled for Thursday. We may not make it, however, based on our public hearing schedule, but we'll kind of play that by ear. I also want to bring up potentially, if my colleagues are in agreement, scheduling an executive session around the election lawsuit. I think it would be good to touch base and sort of see where we're all at on how to proceed once we have the meeting. There's a meeting today.
No, I was gonna say you're.
And then we have another meeting on Monday with the other county defendants and attorneys from DOJ for the Secretary of State. So
Okay.
if we were to schedule it, say on Tuesday, we'd have more information following those two meetings that we could discuss, which I think would be very good.
Does Tuesday at 10 a.m. work for everybody for your calendar? And it can
Yes.
be, we can do it virtually or, via Zoom or in this. Actually, I don't know what the schedule is for this room, but we can figure that out.
Yeah, Chair, I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
To have it, and since we have hearings on Thursday and then DCI event, yeah, I think it would be good.
Okay, so
We could do it on Tuesday.
we'll work to get that executive session separately noticed then for Tuesday at 10. Would the board prefer to do it in person, or is via Zoom or Teams? Is virtual okay?
Virtual is fine with me. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
I can do either one
okay,
because, normally I'm scheduled to meet with you, so
right,
I'm-
right.
I'm right there.
Ken, Carolina, do you guys have what you need? Okay,
Okay.
great, thank you.
Anything else for calendar?
That's it, Chair.
No. Okay. Item
And
D is.
I was going to be able to go to the 4-H and I'm not going to be able to, so it
Okay.
may just be you.
Okay, sounds good. Item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. And we did receive a couple public comments through written testimony. Those have been shared. Do we have any public comments in the audience or virtually on any topic that is not on the agenda? We don't have any land use matters, so anything not on the agenda. Okay, hearing none. For the sake of time, let's see, it's 10:06. Carrie, do you Can you get through it in 15 minutes? Okay, warp speed. We will move on to department updates, which,
You demonstrate your massive efficiency. It's familiar.
and,
Morning.
good morning. We
Thank
are
you
being joined
for
by
inviting
our
me here.
county clerk.
Yes, and I want to
Welcome.
introduce our election supervisor, Kara Warner.
Welcome.
Welcome.
She's joining
Yeah.
me. So in the short 16 weeks I've been clerk, I've performed 19 weddings with 3 more scheduled for Halloween. So your porch will be busy. Our office has recorded 4,467 land use documents. We've sold 267 marriage licenses, and we processed hundreds of voter registration updates. In July, most of the time was spent hitting the ground running. We were evaluating systems, procedures, areas of need and training while working closely with maintenance, IT, and Ken and Justin. And the departments in this county, the department heads and their teams have been amazing. We hired a new OS tech, and her name's Megan Davis. We have a recruitment out right now. So we are looking to backfill Kara's position that she just vacated with her promotion. An adequate amount of time was spent training, evaluating. We needed to figure out what staff knew and what they needed to know, things they weren't quite as up to speed on. There was many webinars and trainings that I needed to attend because I am the OGEC jurisdictional coordinator for the county, in addition to ballot tracks, Homeland Security, and other election infrastructure security and other systems that we utilize over there along with the state. Our redistricting, I found out our redistricting has pockets that need cleaned up, so we're still in the process of addressing that. We finalized our modernization grant that we received from the state, and we begin identifying critical needs and equipment that we need to upgrade in our election processes. The clerk's office was not part of a lot of the extensive training that went into Oracle, and so we got to experience all of that firsthand. I think we're up to speed now. I think all of our transactions are transferring over to Oracle on a daily basis, which is great. In August, we received a petition from the city of Newburgh that resulted in 4 different submittals of signatures, and over 3,000 signatures were verified, with that process being conducted and finalized on October 5th. Voter pamphlet translation began at the state level, and all of our informational pages had to be turned in by August 18th for translation. So you will notice on the state's website, if you go in there, you can select a language. We've been assigned 6 different languages. So if you see our ballot tracks information or our ballot Dropbox site information, you can now have that all translated in a language that you can understand and read. And Kara and I attended the OACC Clerks Conference in August at the same time that all of that was happening. So we were working late into the night in our hotel rooms, getting all of it ready to go to the state so that they could have it translated in time. I met with department heads and other elected officials in the beginning to better understand and collaborate with other county departments to understand the needs that they have and how we can best meet some of those as the clerk's office, because we do interact with different levels of people. We assessed all of our retention schedules as well as all of the documents that we store for other departments, and our archiving system is up to date. It was a great exercise to go through because other departments have the ability to identify documents that have been archived for years and years and years and figure out what their retention schedules were as well. We are down to probably only a few hundred boxes now instead of, I don't know, 500 or 600 boxes. I began the process of introducing myself to all of the vendors, including those who are key to our election process, and figuring out all the timelines in August as to when we needed to have our materials to them and what kind of deadlines they were facing so that we could meet all of those and get ballots out on time, which they were dropped at the post office yesterday. In compliance with ORS 247.281, which requires the clerk to send notices to certain inactive voters, not sooner than 70 days and not later than 60 days before an election, we sent 683 inactive letters to voters. These letters are very specific because they have to state exactly why the person has been inactivated and what they need to do to reactivate. We also mailed over 2,000 voter notification cards and over 300 voter confirmation cards in August. In September, we began the process of getting ready for the election. Ballots were built with deadlines overlapping with the voters pamphlet. We received on-site training for 2 days with our vendor for our vote tally system. which was very informative, and our entire staff was trained, which will allow us to be able to utilize staff more effectively in the future. The voters pamphlet did not come without challenges, and no one in the office had ever helped with this task besides proofing or had been trained. Once we were able to identify the program needed to be used, we spent evenings watching YouTube videos and the webinars on their site to figure out how to make that work.
Hooray for you too.
The deadline to turn in candidate statements for city races and arguments for the voters pamphlet was September 12th, and we received 27 filings and 7 measure arguments that day alone, which was way more than we were expecting in one day. In the end, we succeeded with over 169 hours spent on this. Of the 169 hours, I personally worked 131 hours in 10 days, and we did not stop on the weekends. I estimate that 90% of those 131 hours was exclusively voter pamphlet construction. Staff also helped, and they all came in on the night, in the evenings and weekends to proof and get that out the door. Everything that we do is proofed a million times, and we called in board workers along with other previous staff. National Voter Registration Day was September 20th, and I was invited to the Newburgh High School to talk to the students there, and it was great. We received 5 new voter registrations, and then we came back, and the next day we had over 100 new voter registrations that had been done online through the Oregon Votes system. So that was a great thing. We hosted signature training in September for our current board workers during the midst of all these deadlines because the state was able to get an in-person training set up, and we wanted to take advantage of that. Ballots were printed. There was considerable time spent creating them. A test deck was prepared, and the voters pamphlet was set off to the printers all within days of each other. Most of the election deadlines overlapped within a 2-week period. Military and out-of-country ballots were mailed on September 23rd. Out-of-state and absentees went out on October 11th. And like I said, yesterday, we dropped the ones here in, well, they dropped them in Portland, but they'll be going out today and tomorrow. I spent an entire day on site from 6:30 a.m. until 4 p.m., ensuring the accuracy of the ballots being packaged every step of the way. Every ballot is accounted for, and any excess is counted by me to make sure that every package that we sent had the right ballots and we did not miss any. We had the honor of Secretary Fagan visiting on last Friday, and she toured our facility and was informed of our ballot processing system. She toured the rooms, she saw everything, and that was a great visit. She was very impressed. She said, we have an ideal location. We aren't having to go from building to building like some other counties do. And then on Monday, we conducted our logic and accuracy test, which was exactly how we expected. The results were correct, and 2 people from the state came and watched that as well. And so we are excited that we are set and ready for the election. We continue to give tours of the election process to those who ask, but due to the high visibility of this and also the interest, we have decided to host an open house next Monday from 4 to 6 to welcome everyone in, whether you want to be an observer or board worker, doesn't matter. A lot of people aren't aware of even some of those opportunities, so we want to make that known and get the word out. Myself and staff attended all-day BOC training on October 11th, and we're working closely with the assessor's office because that has also, the pre-work has been done for that because we're entering BOC season. Voter pamphlets arrived at our office on Monday, and I understand that most people have received them, but if people haven't, they can call our office and we will make sure that you get one. We've also worked with ballot tracks. They're the ones that you can sign up for to track your ballot as you vote. And we found some services that we were underutilizing, and so we have implemented those for this election. And we're using their services to the maximum that we can. Our goals moving forward are to continue to review internal processes and procedures to ensure quality and efficient customer service in all areas. Since it's easy sometimes just to focus on the election aspect. We are improving our volunteer process and making sure that board workers are fully trained on election tasks. We have already identified some cost savings in the analysis of our processes, and we will continue to look for ways to accomplish tasks more efficiently with cost savings. Election security remains a top priority. We've had a security analysis done by our IT department, and we're continuing to collaborate with local law enforcement and IT. We're establishing protocols and procedures before security issues occur, and very importantly, maintaining vigilance and having layers of defense while exercising and updating response plans to ensure solid security measures now and into the future. We are also pursuing different avenues to continue to expand community outreach, translation of messages and materials in other languages, and voter education. Hope you have your
Great.
seatbelts fastened.
Oh, yeah.
So we have, I don't know, 3 minutes. So first of all, I just want to say that I'm incredibly impressed, and it's very aware of how much time you and your team have put into this. It's a lot in a very condensed amount of time. So thank you for all of the work. The cross training is so important, and I love that you focused on that because it's key going forward, especially with some of our labor challenges as well. So quick question on the inactive letters. What do you typically see in terms of a response from that? Do people respond to those?
Yes, they do.
Okay,
We received a number of them back, which
Okay,
was very,
good.
very encouraging.
that's
Yeah.
great. Commissioners, any quick questions or comments?
I just want to say thank you. I know you've been there sometimes way late into the night
Yeah.
on the weekends, and you've been so diligent, and I'm grateful that you're doing this job. So thank you
Thank
for the
you.
work and your team, and thank you so much.
We
Yeah.
couldn't do it without everybody.
And clerk, way to get up to speed on everything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So thanks for being here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
We're gonna sneak out the back door.
Okay. So we have a couple minutes. I would hate for Abishai you to get started and then have to restart. So we'll just kind of hang out for a couple minutes.
Well, Chris and I were smelling. the
Everybody
cigarette
packs
smoke,
their
so that's-
stuff.
We're good with that.
Well, if the board would like to, I mean, you could adjust the agenda a little bit. And if you wanted to go down to item G, which is the consent agenda, that's something we could probably do. And
Mhm.
that clock's slow, so we're about 2 minutes away from the drill.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
right.
why don't we skip down to our work session, which we have nothing today. And then item G is our consent agenda. The minutes have been reviewed and all signed, so Carolina, those are on your desk. Do I have a motion to approve?
Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, Commissioner Kula moves approval. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Let's see. I think we'll probably just stop there because I
was
think
gonna say,
the other
we could
items.
do item I1.
Probably.
Since Director Lago is here, but
Okay,
that
let's do
is
that.
really skipping around.
Well,
That's really awful that we're
It's
doing this.
10:19. So
The minutes will be interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, well, given the time, I think we will
pack up your stuff.
pack up our stuff and prepare to recess.
It's nice that we get a warning on this particular earthquake.
I don't think there's an alarm.
It'll come up on Carolina's screen. I know that.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
And it would have come up on mine. I read the email.
It's 10:20. I don't feel anything.
I was wondering about the redistricting because it's not like that's just an automatic application. You know, you have to go in and actually draw those the new maps and
Yeah.
stuff. So that was interesting to hear that there were gaps there.
Mhm.
I was exhausted just listening.
Oh,
was
I know.
like,
She's
Wow.
worked so hard.
Say the drill has
I
started.
hope that the redistricting is for the, like, things like school district and fire board, since everybody else should know
Yeah.
by now,
Yeah.
but since those are put off a little bit. I closed my
10:21.
computer, so
10:21.
maybe let's pretend like there's an earthquake.
Do we have
I don't
anybody
see anything.
watching besides
Yeah.
Willie? No. Yeah, these look pretty sturdy.
Okay.
Maybe it's because we're not getting emails down here. Yeah.
That's all right. Well,
Yeah.
the drill has started and then we'll get ready to evacuate here shortly.
Okay,
Okay, do I have to gavel us out?
Yeah, all we gotta do is recess.
Okay, so I will formally recess the Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for October 20th. It's 10:22 and we will reconvene after the drill. Okay,
in-house or-
we will reconvene the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for October 20th, 2022. It is 10:34. And we are going to pick back up under department updates, item E. And we are now being joined by our SEDCOR, I call you the ambassador, Abisha Stone, to deliver the quarterly report. I think this is Q3, right?
It is,
So
yeah.
welcome, Abisha.
Good morning. Thank you. I like the term ambassador. Appreciate that. All right, so thank you, Chair and Commissioners and staff. I appreciate having an opportunity to come before you and share some of the work that SEDCOR has been doing in the region and specifically in Yamhill County. I know that you've already received a copy of my report, so I'll just go through and kind of call out some of the highlights or things that we're really watching or paying attention to. So that first section, we talk about retention and expansion. There's multiple projects underway in terms of expansion. I want to say that what our employers are struggling most with still is workforce. So a lot of these expansion efforts are also focused on automation. And this is not to displace workers, but it is to fill the gap of where they cannot find folks. And I think that in a lot of ways, this can be a very healthy process for our businesses because as they are potentially automating to fill in maybe those lower paying jobs, lower skilled jobs, that also gives them the ability to train up their existing employees into higher skilled and higher paying positions. And so where we see this pinch point for them in terms of growth, we also see real opportunity to help our community to upskill and potentially make higher wages. So with that optimistic approach, this is what our businesses are attempting to do. It is a struggle for them. There are very few, if any, incentives from the state or from kind of local programs to assist with that type of investment and expansion. As you know, most state programs, if not all state programs, require an increase in staff count, right, in order to benefit from any of the growth or relocation benefit programs. So this is something that businesses are trying to figure out how to do. Most of them are taking on significant amounts of debt in order to do this, but folks are still growing, right? Our local businesses are growing and they're strong. Recruitment of traded sector companies. We called out a couple of specific activities and projects that we've been working on. I think it's important to highlight that McMinnville is identified as an aviation center, really. I mean, a technology and opportunity center for growth in aviation space. And so there tends to be quite a bit of interest in looking around the airport in the city of McMinnville. There's also a lot of conversation around the CHIPS Act and semiconductors. So there's a lot of opportunity and value there in also helping us to identify available industrial lands or lands that could be used for industrial purposes and to make sure that we're putting resources into preparing those lands for use. Not to skip ahead too much, but there's another program I mentioned below in statewide programs that is helping people that with privately owned brownfields to get them cleaned up and remediated in preparation for their best and highest use. And most of those we would be looking at for industrial use. With such a short supply of land for community growth, this is really important. It's very vital. So the state focusing on this semiconductor space, all of the energy around the CHIPS Act, and then also this investment in a brownfield program for privately owned properties. It converges in a really healthy way, I think, for our communities if we can actualize the potentiality of those programs together. We do talk about how I participated in the Select USA program, which is a foreign direct investment program. The state has historically attended this every year. It's in Washington, D.C., and this is where potential investors come from all over the world and consider opportunities for developing and investing in the U.S. So I'll jump down to the regional statewide programs. I already talked, we've had quite a few conversations about rural industrial tax and CPACE financing programs. We did see 3 Yamhill counties apply for high impact opportunity project funding with the state. And I like to share that because I want to make sure that this board and those that are watching understands that this is a very, very innovative county. right? And we're the second largest manufacturing employer in the state. People are looking to do amazing things. And part of the work that SEDCOR does is when we identify where there might be a match of opportunity for grant funds to seed innovative work, we try to connect them to those opportunities. And to have 3 businesses applying for this grant program is extremely impressive coming out of one county in 1 year. That's just really kind of unheard of. So I'm very excited that these folks are digging in and identifying their opportunities to support these really innovative projects. I already talked about the forgivable loan grant program for privately held brownfields. I am concerned about the amount of time we'll actually have to activate this program. You know, as these new programs get funded by the state, they're funded every biennium. They have to perform within that biennium, or they might not get funded again. But on a first-year program, it takes about 18 months for the state to set it up, which means that we end up with about 6 months to prove that it's worthy of funding again. We've had several conversations now with Business Oregon about our concern around this, and looking to talk to legislators to try to see what we can do to support them somehow addressing that. I don't know what that solution might look like, but it really does put potentially good programs in a potentially bad light for underperformance just for lack of time. So I want to call attention to that because it's something we should all be paying attention to. And these programs that we interact with are not the only programs that we see those issues with. I know it takes a long time to set up a strong program at a statewide level. So maybe it would be good if they could give it more time, right, to perform. I already talked a little bit about how we've been also working with other partners in the state around available industrial sites. And again, referencing how the Port of Portland is doing some work in the semiconductor industry task force, and how that is triggering a lot of statewide support and participation in identifying available industrial lands, which I know you all have heard me report on at least annually for the last few years, that this really needs to be an area of focus. I also recently attended the Oregon Economic Development Association conference, where I was asked to present about the success of Project Oasis, which of course is our childcare program that opened their doors in McMinnville, and the family is looking for a second facility opportunity in the future. What was exciting about this is that this really was a public-private partnership led by industry, and it might not seem in this county as though that is rare, because we see our business owners being very, very engaged in trying to address community-based problems. But in many areas of the state, that is rare. And so as we shared about the success of this program, I have been now reached out to by several different jurisdictions asking me to share with their local groups who have been struggling with how to engage the community or pursue solutions to this specific challenge of childcare. We focus on these types of issues when it is a direct workforce relationship, right? So we focus on traded sector businesses majority. We also support all the other businesses in the community, but we really dive into these sorts of projects when it is directly related to workforce impact. And that's where we're at with this issue. I did highlight in this report that the new paid family medical leave insurance program begins January 1st. I know that many of our chambers of commerce have been working diligently to make sure that local businesses are aware of this information and the potential impact to businesses and employees. SEDCOR has been sharing this information out, encouraging folks to speak to their financial partners to make sure that they're aware of the impacts. Another reason why I include this information in here is because we continue to see that pressure for increase of wages. We know that this will not just impact employers, but at various levels, it directly impacts employees. And currently COLA is projecting an 8.6% increase for next year. So it is very likely that employees that face this impact and they see that come out of their checks will look to their employers to make them whole, right? That's just how that works. And so it will certainly be an impact directly for many of these employers, and indirectly for probably all of them. Okay, so I'll focus a little bit more on the conversation. I'm dropping down to other projects and areas of focus. This board asked us many months ago now to carve out some time to really focus on supporting the grant application for the supply chain localization grant program. We hosted that program. At the time that I wrote this, it was still open, but the grant program is now closed for applications. It was open from September 15th to October 15th. I shared out our marketing plan. I know I've kept Ken and his team informed about how we were sharing out the marketing information on that. We had a really good turnout. We had 10 applications, which we expected about a dozen or fewer because it is very, very specific to solving problems associated with supply chain. So we were excited to get 10 applications. They're currently being compiled by Jenny in our office. The grant review committee will be convening our first meeting this coming Monday. We'll be reviewing the program, the process for reviewing the applications, the individual applications themselves. They will be signing, what's the term I'm looking for? The document that declares that they don't have any interest in those conflict of
Legal conflicts
interest.
of
There it
interest.
is.
Yes.
I'm saying the words and can't pull it together. So they'll be signing a conflict of interest form. So we're going through all of those processes as though this is an in-house grant program. They will then have a couple of days to read all of them and score them. We will be convening again next Friday, which I believe is the 27th, where we will be compiling all of those scores and then putting together a formal recommendation for this board. We will be coming before the board on November 10th to present that formal recommendation for funding. Between the 27th and the 10th, I will be submitting to staff the packet, right, that will have all of the information about the applicants, the project descriptions, and the scoring metric, and then, of course, our recommendation. And I'll follow up with Ken to make sure that we're getting all of the information that y'all are looking for and that we get it to in a timely manner. Just some updates on the Barbara Roberts Career Technical Education Center. They continue to seek gap funding. They have a couple of very strong asks in for some funding. And they are moving forward with their first track, which is fire science, and partnering with the fire department, who is looking to build a fire tower. I've been working with local material suppliers to try to secure some donations of materials to help bring that cost down and certainly make sure that our community is engaged in that process. But things continue to move forward. Their contracted service providers, their consultants are doing a great job of making sure that they're accessing all the opportunities they can for getting those donations and moving that project forward. The Newburgh Workforce Housing Consortium continues to meet. We actually met again since I provided this report, and we'll be working with the Missing Middle Housing Fund to put together a bit of a summit. And we are unclear about the timeline because the holidays are fast approaching, but to make sure that we're engaging the community and community of developers and other resource partners as we move into final definition of our project.
And do you have a timeline on, or do you have a deadline on spending the money that came from the legislature?
By contract, said Corps' expenditure deadline is June 30th of 2023.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that the project has to be completed by then, but it has to be committed to the project, right?
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I didn't interrupt, but
No, I think it's a great question. Yeah. So each of those, you get a year generally to expend those funds. And we know that a year is not a long, yeah, it's not a very long time.
Abishai, excuse me, a quick question about the CTEC. I remember when they were talking about the just the increase in construction costs was probably going to be something like on the order of double what they were anticipating. How are they making up that shortfall?
Well, so there is a conversation. I was just having a conversation with Chair Bershauer about this earlier this week. Part of that was related to whether or not they needed to lift the building to determine whether or not they were in a floodplain. And there's been some back and forth on what documents they were looking at when they made that determination that they might have to consider it, and whether it was the right parcel of property. And then the school district board was trying to determine whether they would want to incur that process and cost, even if it wasn't required, because, Sheridan does experience those issues. So that is a portion of the cost, which is yet to be determined whether it will have to be seen. The rest of that cost was entirely related to true cost of materials, right? We've seen the cost of materials and labor continue to increase. And depending on the funding type, different wage structures have to be considered. So they are looking to pursue the funding to close a larger gap is how they're approaching that.
But they don't have any particular source in mind.
For that funding. They are pursuing a couple of different approaches. One of them is congressionally designated funds. I'm forgetting the term for another source of funding that they're
Another
looking.
grant.
What was that?
The other grant, we
Yeah,
talked about it.
I can't remember the name of it right now. I
name is.
apologize. I
Okay.
don't have it in front of me. And those were sizable. It was somewhere around $4.5 million between
okay.
those two, which would be a significant bump. So this team has really had to hit the ground running and figure out how to close that gap. And that's why we're looking at all of the options and opportunities. And now I'm pursuing material donations as well, right? Because we have to, it's always braided funding on projects like this. You're never going to get everything funded from one source. And I've never even seen it happen from 2 or 3 sources. So it puts more work on the desk.
So in addition to, so you're working with them,
Yeah.
who is the them? I mean, what is the entity or the subgroup of the CTEC project?
Yeah, fair enough. There's a couple of groups. And they are, Superintendent Vickery
Mhm.
is contracting with Emerald Flash, which is a consultancy. And I believe they came before you at one point, or Brent did, or maybe Ron came before you. We had a couple of independent
Okay.
conversations. So they are actually the ones that are doing the development work on the funding
Okay, I
development
remember
end.
them.
So she's working
Really
with
tall
consultants.
guy is
Yeah.
Brent.
Yeah, so she is working with consultants to help her with that portion of things. And then we have there's actually a couple of different subgroups. So we have the Industry Advisory Committee, which I help to convene. Then there's another group that is focused kind of whole project focus, where she also has a school board member, some of her educators, and then local community members. So there are a couple of different groups attacking different portions of this, which is what you need.
Mm.
Well,
But
thank
she
you.
has it very well structured, some really strong groups just seeking that funding.
Thank you.
And then this last note here, just an update on that Mid-Willamette Valley Regional Innovation Hub. I know that you've had many conversations with the city of McMinnville around their innovation center. So again, the difference between program and place. And at the same time, this all works together. So SEDCOR is partnered with MEDP, the city of McMinnville, the city of Salem, all the partners in our 3-county region around innovation. So we got this funding to support this work at a regional level, and have recently identified a contractor to guide us through. This is the funding that came from the state for this phase 1 is to understand what the true needs and opportunities are for the region. So we have to, contract somebody to walk us through that process, to put that report together. And then depending on what we determine out of that, then we go back to the state and ask for round 2 funding, which could look like a lot of different things. But we're working very, very closely with all of those partners. And again, the Regional Innovation Center concept is a part of that work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so,
Thanks for explaining the difference between the program and.
Mhm.
right. And
Before
they,
I was like, I don't understand. Isn't SEDCOR, don't they have money for this? Why is the city? Got it.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. And once we go through this work, if it's determined that a physical space is valuable and necessary and would support this region, then essentially we could go back for that round 2 and say, this is what
Right.
the report determined and how can we help to fund those activities?
That makes sense. But it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical space.
Not necessarily,
Yeah,
no,
it can be a hub of people and businesses working together.
absolutely.
Great.
So
Thank
those are
you.
just the highlights.
Yeah.
Certainly, I'm prepared to answer any questions if you might have any.
Thank you.
Well, we talked at length earlier this week, so commissioners, any follow-up questions
No,
or?
I just asked them, thank you.
Yeah, no, that was very helpful. Appreciate it. Thanks for the update on a couple of things that I knew about, but didn't know where they were. So.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, I'll see you on November 10th.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
again.
That's
Okay,
right.
Appreciate
Thanks a
it.
lot,
Yes.
Abisha.
It'll be exciting to see you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have already tackled the work session and the consent agenda. So now we are moving on to item H, which is old business, item H1. is consideration of approval of amendment number 9 to agreement number 169533 between Yamhill County and Oregon Health Authority, OHA, for the financing of public health services, Board Order 21-248, adding funding award in the amount of $68,644.63. This is retroactive to August 1st of 2022 through June 30th of 2023, and this item was continued from October 13th of 2022.
Chair, I had some concerns about this, the wording in this contract, and have had a couple of conversations with our Health and Human Services Director and with our administrator, and I would like to just call out a couple of the things in the contract that I found of concern.
Okay.
And that is why I had asked that we have a further discussion. So a couple of things. I had asked on page 9, it says that the local public health authorities have to submit vaccine administration and VAERS data, the adverse event data, in accordance with federal and OHA guidance. I had asked whether or not we had any data on this, and our Health and Human Services Director said that we didn't have any. It's federally required, and we know that according to the government, only about 1% is being reported. But I guess if there isn't any that has been reported, or we don't have data, I think that would be something for us to, look at going forward.
And Commissioners, is it that we would get it as administrators of the vaccine, but also from physicians, and then that would go on? Is that how, that kind of the chain?
Yes, and I guess if they haven't submitted any, then
Mhm.
we wouldn't know about it. But I guess at this point, we just don't have the data.
Okay.
And
okay.
that was something I would be
Okay,
interested in
that's
seeing.
helpful. Thank you.
The next thing on page 10, which I'm going to say is considerably concerning to me, is item F that says we are, as per the contract, to promote COVID and other vaccinations to increase vaccine confidence by culturally specific groups, communities of color, and others to increase accessibility for people with disabilities. Now, I believe that our role in local public health is to provide these vaccines. But when you talk about increased vaccine confidence, I have some concerns about promoting something that, we didn't have the data 2 years ago that we have today. We now have updated VAERS data and VSafe data, which just came out this week, and Pfizer data, which might mitigate some of our increasing vaccine confidence. So that was one particular thing. And we're supposed to be doing education related to COVID. So I wanted to know, well, what particular education are we including all the data, which is including not just it's the safe and effective narrative, but are we including the recent CDC data? I guess what I'm advocating for is that we include the most recent CDC and Pfizer data so that people can truly make that determination for themselves. I'm not asking for anything from the dark web to be put up there, but
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing what you're
we
saying.
do have CDC data, and we do have, in fact, the VSafe data, which is what people get to when they have a vaccine on their phone, get to self-report.
Right.
So that wasn't forthcoming from CDC. There were a number of lawsuits, and they did a Freedom of Information Act request, and that just came out this week from to the Informed Consent Action Network. So we have that data, and then we just got the 30,000 pages of the first Pfizer clinical data, which, as you know, the FDA wanted to keep confidential for 75 years. That's come out, and that tells a different story. So when we see that data and the VAERS data, vaccine adverse event reporting data from the CDC, which are all CDC run, I think if we can include that, not just a link to the most complicated and convoluted system that VAERS is, but that people actually get numbers and data. So that's something that I was interested in seeing. The other things had to do with the tobacco influences, which we've had that discussion. I was wondering whether or not our job, because it talks about we were, as a local public health authority, supposed to advance tobacco retail licensure. But and at AOC, we had a lot of conversations about how this was going to impact our retailers having to, get licenses and do this type of enforcement at their but it's a state law and that's something that, Director Manfred pointed out. But I
That we
do,
have to administer.
though we
even
have
if
to,
We don't want to.
even if we don't want to, but I still think that putting us in the position of advocating for any policy like that takes us out of the scope of, I think, public health, although smoking is, nobody's going to agree smoking is okay.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. How about that?
So a couple of the other things that I had been contacted by a number of moms in the community. And one of the things under page 15, under description of public health item number 1, program element 43, is that services include population-based services, including public education to increase vaccine confidence. Now, I know that vaccine hesitancy is now considered, public enemy number 1. In fact, World Health Organization includes it as one of the most dire global health threats. I think we've got stuff like fentanyl and opioid issues that are more problematic than vaccine hesitancy. But when we take on advocating for trying to convince people to take vaccines instead of advocating for them to have all the information and make that decision themselves, that's concerning. The other thing is that several moms were concerned about what the Yamhill County Health and Human Services Facebook postings were regarding school immunization exemption information. And I asked Director Manfred if she could take a look at this posting, which said, basically, your kids can't go to school after a certain date. And the law in Oregon is that you can do an exemption, a non-medical exemption.
But
So
did it not have that information?
it wasn't in there, and
I
I
see what you mean.
appreciate the
Yeah.
correction. They made the correction.
Mhm.
But when I said this is not just a one-off thing, apparently I've got some screenshots of the past Facebook postings that show that this has been a year over year. We're not really letting parents know the whole story. So I do have that information, and I think that we should be not telling one side of the story. I think we see public health as really, we're seeing a lot of people are losing confidence. In fact, our 3 governor candidates who don't agree on anything agree on one thing, and that's the Oregon Health Authority must be defunded, dismantled in some regard. I mean, even Tina Kotek, who I agree with on nothing, said Steve Allen, behavioral health, and Pat Allen, director of health, OHA, need to go.
Yeah.
I thought that they agreed that Merritt Paulson needed to sell the thorns and the timbers, but.
Oh,
So
did they
two
agree on 2
things.
things?
Two
Okay.
things.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that
I just
was-
needed to throw some soccer in for Christian.
Christian, because he gets so bored.
Because he's
with
like,
his
oh, I'm listening.
soccer thing.
You were-
Um,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but.
So,
Yeah.
the whole, like, in other words, all this behavioral health money we haven't seen for our addiction community. And so I appreciate what Tina Kotek said and what the other candidates said about this is not working. It's big and bloated and we have no collaboration. So when we get contracts like this, where basically we're kind of like told, I know our director, health and human service director, is in a difficult position. She works for the county, but she's also got the mandates of these contracts. But where does the buck stop when we see things that we see this dysfunctional organization, Oregon Health Authority, that doesn't allow us to change anything, to make it county specific, to address our concerns about, promoting, your job is now to promote the vaccine and promote vaccine, counter vaccine hesitancy. I don't think that's our job. And I am concerned about this. And for those who call me an anti-vaxxer, I just want to go back to 5 years ago when I found out the CCO wasn't telling parents that they could choose non-mercury fillings. So it has nothing to do with vaccines. It has everything to do with giving people health choices. It took 5 years, and now the FDA has a warning out to pregnant women and kids. So it's an evolving thing, but if we don't make any efforts at the local level, how do we maintain public health confidence?
Well, I guess,
Right.
so I'm just thinking about the line about including public education to increase vaccine confidence. And of course, that's been in the contract every time we've approved an amendment kind of on an ongoing basis. But I come from the perspective of providing accurate information is the route to increasing confidence. And so I guess I don't see it as an either or. It's increasing confidence isn't the same thing as countering, what did you say? Countering vaccine hesitancy.
Well, that's what we're asked to do. It talks
Well,
about vaccine hesitancy.
Vaccine hesitancy is a political term. It is not a
But I don't
health
see it
term.
in here. Which line is it?
Let me find it for you.
It's on page, 15, I think you said, and page 10.
Well, I see public education to increase vaccine confidence, but I don't see the
Hold
phrase
on,
that you're referring to.
Hold on one
Well, I
second.
think my frustration, and this is more of a high level comment, is, first of all, that debate when the 3 candidates for governor admitted that OHA is too large, it's too powerful, it needs to be dismantled, and that there will be, quote, no more Allens working for OHA, unquote. That was shocking. That is a shocking admittance to, what we've experienced over the past 2 years. They have put us through, I don't even want to describe over the past 2 years, for advocating for more information, for advocating for freedom of choice over what someone puts in their body. And now we get to the point where, this has come to a head. And all of a sudden, OHA needs to be dismantled. It's shocking. I would call it vindication on many levels. But I guess I want to ask the question, why are we including this anyway? We don't go out and address vaccine hesitancy for the flu shot. We simply offer the flu shot. If you want the flu shot, you can get a flu shot. We don't address people's hesitancy or choice against doing that. And the CEO of Moderna came out yesterday and said that COVID is now tantamount to the flu, that it's going to require boosters every single year, much like the flu is sort of, the flu vaccine comes out. And so I'm not really sure why we're doing this for COVID and the COVID vaccine, but we don't do it for other ones.
Well, just to clarify, page 15 is about all vaccines that are administered through the county.
This says promote
Page
COVID,
15 is
COVID-19
specific.
vaccines.
No, but what I'm saying is that page 15 is for all vaccines. So
I'm looking at
we
page
are
10.
providing confidence. We are promoting confidence through this.
Right, but what does that mean? What is the county going to do? What are we going to go out and say to the public that, we have to increase the numbers of COVID-19 boosters? What exactly does that look like? And I don't even know why we're doing that in the first place, because we don't do it for other vaccines.
Well, I'm just saying that that's what we do is this page 15 is specifically refers to all vaccines. So we do that as a public health agency. And I say we because staff perform that on a daily basis based upon the agreement that we've agreed upon multiple times.
Right,
Like
but
I think we've signed this contract.
hindsight is
dozen times.
2020. We're now at a point where we're realizing that the OHA didn't exactly roll this out in the best way. And yet the contracts are still reflecting the same things that we've been doing. I'm just not sure why we even include this in here.
I mean, I think that just like the when our McKaylee sends out an email about the flu shot clinic, that's part of promoting or doing publication to increase vaccine confidence, right? Is to isn't that part of it? I mean, we're doing immunizations at public health. That's what we've agreed to.
Right, but how is that tackling vaccine hesitancy?
I don't see vaccine hesitancy I don't see the words. Can you show me?
That's,
Oh, are you looking at a different page? I'm looking at page 15.
I'm looking at page 10.
Page 10 has the promote COVID-19 and other vaccinations to increase vaccine confidence.
Okay, so that doesn't say hesitancy. That's correct? Oh, I see. Yep. Promote COVID-19 and other vaccinations to increase vaccine confidence by culturally specific groups. And then if you go to page 15, it also says, you agree to do public education to increase vaccine confidence. And that's for all immunizations that are provided by the
Right.
public health department.
But I think to Commissioner Starrett's point, how do you increase confidence if you give one side of the story? I think that we need to be offering all sides. And I am one of those moms who receives a letter in the mail that scares the what out of parents because they think they can't send their kids to school, that they're somehow being punished because they can't send their kids to school on exemption day or exception day or whatever they call it. It is very one-sided. The information about what the rights that you have as a parent in order to process and go through the process of exemption is not clear. And I remember receiving that letter several years ago and reaching out to some fellow moms and saying, what do I do about this? And they knew because they'd been through it.
Sure.
But I just don't, I go back to the high level of why are we still signing contracts and entering into contracts where our job is to push the vaccine or address vaccine confidence, AKA hesitancy, because that's really what it means. When we have all of these red flags coming forward from the CDC, from the FDA, we have, the CEOs of these companies coming forward and saying, well, this is just going to be like the flu. The COVID is now really the flu. So you're just going to need a booster shot every year. And we have a massive level of distrust in OHA. And it's coming through even in our gubernatorial debates at this point.
So it sounds like there's a question, and I think it's a strong, real question where you want to find out what public health specifically is doing in terms of education to increase vaccine confidence. That's
No, I got that information, or
Sorry.
I got
but I-
an answer from Director Manfred where it was basically, we're just going to let, it was a sort of a generic kind of, I'll see if I have it here. A generic response that I don't feel was indicative of how we're actually, let me find that email
Yeah.
so that I don't misquote. The
And I
director.
apologize. I should have said chair because I was referring to chair because you were asking, well, what are we doing here? And are we providing only one side? And so it seems like that's a question that's best answered by the person who's in charge of public health.
Well, I have it here so I can quote from it, but I guess the question
I
comes
have
down
it.
to, you have it?
I have it.
And the other thing I've asked Christian and Ken before is, as a local public health authority, which if you drill down into the statute, means the governing body, but we also receive money from OHA to do certain things per their contracts.
Mhm.
So where is the autonomy, or maybe that's not even a good word, but if we're supposed to sign off on these, is it just a question of we have to sign off on the whole thing or not sign off on anything? And then why doesn't OHA just take it and we could save ourselves a lot of money by not having a public health authority? Because why are we here if this contract becomes sign it or else? There's a gun to our head.
Right. And we had this
I don't,
conversation.
sorry,
at
I don't know the
district 6.
answer to that specifically, but I will say that as far as I know, we do as we add offerings to the community, public health offerings, and we add those to the contract. So we're not approving things that we don't do, if that makes sense.
Well, and Director Manfred brought up a really good point. She goes, well, we did do something different and was in keeping with our contract when we said, we're not going to give, and that was a board decision, we're not going to give gift cards to get a vaccine. And some counties were giving out gift cards.
Right.
And so there was that, and we were not out of line with our contract.
Correct.
And I would imagine too, I know you're
Yeah,
gonna
that's it.
add something, but I would imagine that that OHA or programmatic staff at OHA, if they were to operate in parallel to our public health staff, would define providing public education to increase vaccine confidence, that they would define that differently than public health staff who are here, who are part of this community, right?
Right.
And that's part, to me at least, that's why we have contracts with the OHAs, because we agree to do things in a generic sense, and then we do them in the specific sense for the community, and it counts for the generic sense, if that makes sense. That we're doing things in a square, but a square is a rectangle, so it fits into the increasing public confidence in vaccines. But Ken was going to say something.
No, the only thing I was going to do is because there was reference to Director Manfred's information that she provided on what public health does, what they consider promoting, that keeps us compliant with the agreement. Because again, this condition has been in our contracts. This isn't something new. And so the items that the director listed, we promote vaccine confidence in the following ways: encouraging people to ask questions, encouraging people to seek information and advice from their trusted healthcare provider. And that's something that Director Manfred emphasizes a lot is if you have questions, go to your trusted provider, your trusted healthcare provider, whoever, you know, and get that information that you need and those questions that you have answered. And then we also are very diligent in providing information about both risks and benefits found in the vaccine information sheets. She's attached some examples, and we also have it posted under in our FAQs. You know, I'm thinking in particular, like the COVID vaccines in particular, there's a pretty extensive, lengthy FAQ section that has a lot of information that's there, including access to sources of data, access to CDC, access to OHA, access to VAERS, you know, all of that, you know, there's a lot of information and links provided on our county website. You know, so again, and she lists some of those areas of the information that's provided: serious reactions, including death listed, VAERS information, vaccine injury program, a link to the package that comes with the vaccinations as well. So that, you know, under that category, when we talk about promoting or what we've done, you know, this is the strategy that we've taken. You know, we're not, you know, it's information that we post to our website. It's information that's provided to anyone who walks into the public health facility to get a vaccination or has a question about that. The information is there. You know, we're not buying ad space. We're not, you know, through media, we're not doing other than a specific event where we have it, you know, we may be in the past, we may have done a vaccine event, but again, it's making that advertising that we have this available and it's available for access.
I have a couple of questions about that. About 5 years ago, I asked that we start to include vaccine ingredients when we hand people information, and the Board of Health would not agree to that. And Director Manfred said, you know, this is not something that we're going to do. I think it's really important for people to have all the information, and you can look up the ingredients and you can see what's in them. And it's not something we have on our website. I'll tell you that much. I've got a listing here, and if I read them, you would think I was making it up. You would think I was making this up, but this is not information we're putting out there. You know, that there's, you know, mercury-based thimerosal in the vaccines, that there's polyethylene glycol, that there's fetal cells. And when I brought this up at the Board of Health years ago, they actually brought somebody from OHA, 2 people from OHA, to come and say, hey, nothing to see here. But still, this is still information. When we tell people we're giving them vaccine ingredients, we're not. We are patently not. And when we say we're giving information on VAERS, what we're doing is we're giving a link to what basically VAERS is, but we're not giving them the raw data, which shows the numbers. And we're not giving the list that Pfizer just came out with of all of the adverse events, which if people saw them, they might be more informed. So that's why I'm saying, if we're not going to be willing to put the information on our website, other than this boilerplate stuff, I think we're giving half the story. And I don't think that we should be, you know, trying to increase confidence without giving the full story. It's Nuremberg Code 101, informed consent.
I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Well, it sounds like there's two sort of frustrations happening. One is, what is our role as a local public health authority if OHA is going to dictate and determine everything that we do and everything that's in our contracts and how we spend our money? That is happening on a statewide level,
Yeah.
frankly. We've had this conversation at District 6. It's a frustration. And given the abuse that we've taken over the past 2.5 years, it's not surprising. I think I'm concerned about the specifics of a contract with, and we're pulling out COVID-19 because that's what's in here. It could be any other vaccine, I suppose, but it's
Page
what's in
15
here.
is every other vaccine. I'm sorry, that we administer.
Well,
So it's in here. Sorry to interrupt. I just want to
we,
clarify.
but if you, I mean,
10.
there's
Page
a,
15.
you can get into the technical parts of this, but there's also the reality of what happened, right? They were pushing this vaccine hard without releasing data on the effects on adults. And now we're pushing it on children, right? And we have the folks from the vaccine companies coming out and saying, well, it really only just needs to go to the high risk people now. And I was watching a COVID seminar last week that said that there is no mild case of myocarditis. It is extremely serious. You don't just get myocarditis and then you get over it and it's no big deal. Like it's just a little bump on your arm type of side effect. So it's a fine line between increasing, I just think that increasing vaccine confidence, also known as addressing hesitancy, is a very fine line for us to do if we are only providing one side of the story or making it more difficult to understand the risks. I don't think we should engage in that at all unless we are going to come to the table with a very balanced set of information and data.
Have you gone to, this is a personal question, you don't have to answer it, but have you gone to public health for any vaccinations, immunizations for you or your family?
I've gone to my doctor.
But not to public health?
No.
Okay, so I just want to note that, after page 15, because I want to say that page 15 references every other immunization that we offer at Yamhill County. It talks about exactly the information that's provided to people, the contraindications that are asked of people. To my view, having had immunizations, including COVID vaccine at public health, they are providing the full picture. And the reason why I can say that and Commissioner Sterritt can say they're not is because OHA is saying that they have to do some things, but we are doing quite a well-rounded, in my view, perspective and sharing of information, both making it available on the website, but when you come in to get a vaccination and even beforehand when you schedule one. And they ask you on the phone, okay, what are these things? What's your record before? Do you know about this? So to me, there are some things that are required here, including, I will note, sorry, where was it in this? So at vaccine administration time, so that's when you're given the shot, it's confirmed that the parent, recipient, legal representative has read or can read to them the EUA or the BIS, make it available in formats that they can read, provide documentation of vaccines received at the service, screen for contraindications and precautions. This is all like what we're required to do right now per the contract. And I believe that that public health is really going beyond that by providing more information. And so that's part of the public education that increases vaccine confidence, is making sure that people don't have the contraindications and that they have the information that's available in order to make a good decision. And so that's for all of them,
But some
not
of
just for a
these,
COVID vaccine.
some of these people are 16 years old, right?
Mhm.
So we're telling 16-year-olds to go to VAERS and verify the risks of a vaccine.
Are we
Without
talking
their
now about
parents?
if they're on their own?
Well, I'm just saying that the reason that we have some heightened levels of data that we're offering is in large part because of Commissioner Sterritt. So these concerns, as she stated, they're ongoing. They're kind of morphing as some of these things around COVID-19 change. I just don't, I think going back to Commissioner Sterritt's point that we're making this as convoluted and complicated as possible, people they're not going to understand what they're looking at. So
if
why
give
would
them
we
more
not-
information, they're not going to understand. Is that what you're saying?
well, providing a link to VAERS, I'm not sure most people even know what VAERS is. Or at least they didn't before COVID-19 probably. So what does that mean?
Mhm.
Are we giving statistics on vaccine injury? Are we giving statistics on, you know, some of this new information that's coming out in these documents that are being released through lawsuits?
So, but you were just saying that giving people more information is complicated and confusing for them.
I'm saying it's purposefully made that way.
You're saying that giving them more information is purposefully confusing. But we
Yes.
were just
And
talking
I've
about
lived
having,
through
giving
that
them
as a
more
parent.
information is balance. I'm confused now. So we have a contract here. We've approved it many times in the past to add service element to provide public health services in the community
Mhm.
in ways that are tailored to the community. You have done work diligently and sometimes in opposite and against my opposition to have more information and to provide services in a way that's locally relevant, I guess would be a way to think about it, right? We interpret things like the phrase that you have concern about in public education to increase confidence in vaccines. We in the local level interpret that the way that we get to decide, right? But we should, in my view, we should approve the contract because we have done it over time and staff do the work that's necessary to meet the standards of the contract in a locally relevant way.
Can you, and I appreciate that. Can you describe how we're making this locally relevant apart from the boilerplate contract that every other county has gotten?
We can read us an email.
That's
That's the answer to that question.
not really, it isn't the answer to the question because when
You don't think it is.
No, I'm saying it's not because when I asked specifically how we're raising immunization rates per page 19 of the contract, I was told through vaccine back to school night, various other activities were, you know, going to schools, going to early learning. I can't remember, early learning hub. I'm not sure if that's what that is, but basically special clinics. So again, what I'm saying is that the information, you know, we can say, well, we've been doing it this way. Well, for the last 2 years, while there have been many of us who've had concerns about how quickly these come out, I mean, there are vaccines that have a really good track record and they have stood the test of time in terms of injury. We're seeing one now that has more injuries logged than every other vaccine put together. And this is just in a short amount of time. So what I'm saying is there are vaccines and there are vaccines. This one is different in that we're seeing a vast amount of concerning data. For instance, they're telling people on the website, you know, you should get vaccinated if you're pregnant or check with your doctor. Do you know that not one pregnant woman was included in the clinical trials? So how do we know that? Now we're finding out there are miscarriages and all kinds of reproductive issues that are coming out as a result of the Pfizer data, which we didn't have 2 years ago.
Can I comment to page 19? So page 19 again is for all immunizations. So the thing you're referring to is for all immunizations and raising immunization rates. So we're not talking specifically about COVID with the clauses on page 19.
No, I'm talking about when it says these are designed to raise immunization rates. And so I asked, well, specifically, you know, where is that done? So that what Ken was referring to, that was not specific to COVID. That was
Right.
again,
That's what I'm saying.
right. And
Yeah.
neither is this. This is, I just said, well, what does it mean that we have, we do activities designed to raise immunization
Right.
rates. So we've always done that. You're right.
Mhm.
But we've never included a vaccine that was experimental and that we, you know, I mean, we had an issue where we tried to make sure that at least kids got to notify, they had to notify their parents in case they had an adverse event. Their parents would know that this could perhaps be related to the vaccine. OHA by 3 o'clock that day clamped down and said, you're in violation of your contract. And if you continue to do this, you'll be fined $500 a day. So basically they're saying you do it our way. Remember that? Remember that we did
I didn't
that?
realize that I didn't know we could get fined for violating a contract, but
Violating
maybe-
the provision of, do you remember that?
maybe these two gentlemen remember this.
So basically, you remember what we're talking about?
I remember what we're
Maybe.
talking about.
Yeah,
Maybe
I just
there
don't
were some
remember
local
context.
policy decisions that the board was discussing implementing. And at the time, other counties were considering similar language. And there was some question as to whether or not some guidance from OHA at the time would have or wouldn't have allowed for those local sort of perspectives. The board took some action. And then later, I believe in that same day, if I'm recalling the same scenario, then OHA clarified their guidance to say that that local policy decision was
Mhm.
not in accordance with their guidance.
Mm.
That's right. I remember that, like, there was language on
It
the
was
website that
within,
changed.
it
right?
was
I think
less
you-
than 24 hours. They,
Right.
that
right.
day.
yep.
Yeah. it
And
was very-
the threat
it was
was,
quick.
you know, a fine was if, like, in other words, that our employees could be.
But
I
it
think they
clarif-
may have said that.
If
yeah,
it's the topic that I'm thinking of, just to clarify,
Mhm.
it wasn't necessarily a contract violation, it was a statutory
was, yeah.
violation.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know
Yeah,
that
it wasn't a contract.
OHA, you know, pivoted pretty quickly saying this is not something you can do. So.
But
while-
that is the mechanism they have if they feel that if we're violating the
Right.
contract. You know, they can either terminate the contract or there are some
Right.
other mechanisms in there for them to enforce the contract.
Yeah.
And this language, as Commissioner Kula has said, is in our existing contract. I was taking a look at the most recent amendment we did just before this. And so I don't know if this helps sort of move the conversation forward, but if there are concerns about this language, it is already in our agreement. If the concern is how are we delivering this information or how are we performing our obligations around these elements, that's more of an internal conversation that I think maybe would be good to continue to have with HHS and Director Manfred. But if we wanted to change this language, we would then have to go back and propose our own amendment to the agreement. And we do that from time to time. There is a work group comprised of county council representatives from various counties that review these large IGAs every time OHA releases a new document. Admittedly, we don't spend as much time focusing on the programmatic elements because that's what we leave to the health professionals and look more at the contractual language. But that doesn't mean to say that there aren't sometimes questions raised about program elements, and there aren't sometimes opportunities to have further discussions with OHA about what particular program elements say and require and possibly make propose amendments to those. So that has happened in my experience in the past. It doesn't appear to have happened with this particular program element or this particular language. So I don't know if that helps sort of frame where we are with regards to the specific amendment ask that's before the board, as opposed to the larger concerns about what the program element language might suggest we do or require us to do.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, you know, what we as a board consider, and also we have to look at what the statute says about, you know, what are the parameters of what we can do here. And so if is this an exercise in formality? Is it programmatic? Is it sort of a pro forma where we just come here and we just, okay, OHA said you have to do this. Now we just sign it. And I know that we're just hearing a lot of frustration from other counties as far as this. And I've spoken to other county councils who have said this is not an unusual conversation where you have the board you've got a health and human services director who's kind of, you know, straddling both worlds, and it's really difficult for them. And I understand that. And I don't want to put our health and human services director in an uncomfortable position. But we have to remember, we don't work for OHA. And neither does our health and human services director. We're responsible and accountable to people who are saying, you just signed a contract that says you're going to basically try to increase confidence in the COVID vaccine, which I think is patently unethical at this point, since we do have information we didn't have 2 years ago. So to me, as I said earlier, maybe we can't change the wording of this, but maybe what we can do is add more information to our website, which shows people, here you go, we've got some new data, you might want to look at it. And then you look at the statement that says safe and effective that's still on our website, and you decide whether or not which is which. do we have confidence in our public health folks if they're saying safe and effective, but on this other page, I just saw, whoa, maybe not.
Well, I think my concern is that this is a contract. We are half of the contract. So we do have the ability to add or remove things in a contract that we sign.
We can go back to OHA if we want to propose amendments and changes to the language. They may or may not accept it. And at some point, we may be faced with the decision of whether or not we want to sign off on a particular program element and accept a particular amount of money to fund a particular service.
There's a difference, there is a difference because page 19, as Commissioner Kula keeps bringing up about other vaccines, is, in my view, and I've read this 3 times now, it's regarding access. There's a big difference between access in providing access or even making access easier for underserved communities. We've talked about that a lot. That's one thing. Promoting the COVID vaccine and addressing vaccine hesitancy is a totally different ballgame. And we've had that debate numerous times over the past couple of years. We had it around parental consent. We had it around offering freebies and giveaways and, free stuff essentially for getting the vaccine. We've had this argument and we've seen other things in other counties where they were going out and buying UTVs and spending this money on ridiculous things in order to reach, migrant workers and offer them the vaccine. This is something that every county has sort of tackled over the past couple of years. I'm just not sure that it's worth providing this accepting this kind of language in these contracts going forward. I don't think access is one thing. If we are going to provide access to a vaccine, that's one thing.
I just want to clarify that we didn't offer any of those types of incentives or
No,
anything like that
we
with
didn't.
our programs here locally. And, and that's again, I just want to emphasize again, that's an example on how while we have contract language that describes the parameters and things that we're supposed to do, it doesn't necessarily get down into the details. And we've implemented, based on discussions with the board, strategies on how we've been able to roll out information and put the information out there that the board would like to see to, again, address that balanced approach. But again, we did not participate in incentive programs. We didn't offer gift cards. We didn't, we're not running regular ads on TV. We're not doing that type. All we're doing is we're putting information out there, making it known that you can get it at our public health, that we have done events in the past where people can come and learn more or get the vaccine if they so choose. And I just, again, I want to emphasize and just make sure it's clear that, staff and I have heard the direction from the board and the discussions from the board, and we, that's how we've applied the policies and stayed compliant under the contract by making information available and making sure that we're not necessarily promoting, but we're promoting where you can get access to it if you so choose to have access to that. And I just wanted to clarify again that, a lot of those other programs, we did not participate in a rollout here locally.
Yeah, we didn't, but there was certainly a fight, especially publicly, over the money and turning down money potentially for that because we didn't want to participate in that.
I mean, we accepted money for specific things like making it available, making events available, having translators, having Unidos be able to do something on a weekend festival.
Right.
We did approve money for access and education.
Access.
Yeah,
Access.
right.
But that's my point. I have no problem with access.
But
Um,
we can interpret, and I will say that, thank you for your interjections. I appreciate it. We can interpret
Promotion.
page, I want to get this right because you said page 15.
It
It's
says
actually page 10.
promote
Page 10.
COVID-19 vaccine and
Page
increase
10.
vaccine confidence.
Yes, so we can interpret that as access and education. And that's actually what we have interpreted in the past. That's what Ken's referring to. And so if you have and Commissioner Starrett made I think the really crucial point about this is that kind of going off of Christian's thing, is that we can either interpret F as access and education, or we can say, hey, no way. And in the past, we've interpreted F as access and education.
Well, the only thing is when you sign a contract that says that you will promote COVID vaccinations to increase confidence, that is not the same as you will make COVID vaccines accessible and include information so people can make their own choices. We are being asked to tell one side of the story.
I don't interpret it that way, Commissioner.
Increase vaccine confidence.
Yeah.
Means we have to make sure that people are confident in getting these. And we can't do that if we're not giving all the information because it's not all up there.
And our public health authority has interpreted F by providing information, helping educate people, including some of the requirements that are further down, and then making sure it's accessible to them. And what I hear you interpreting increasing vaccine confidence in a very particular way that I don't think we're doing at the county. And I think that you would agree with what the county is doing.
I think we are promoting increasing confidence because we're not giving all the information. So ergo, there wouldn't be a lot of confidence, perhaps, if they got all the information. So in other words, if you wanted people to be confident, you'll tell them, increase their confidence in the vaccine. We'll give you certain information. But if we were to give you additional information, you might not have so much confidence in it. And that's what's not up there.
And I certainly, so what I'm hearing you say is that in order to really feel confident in item F, that we're doing it in a way that you agree with, is that we will include more information that we haven't and that public health and the Board of Health have been resistant to. Would that be an accurate?
It doesn't have to be what I agree with. It has to agree with data that exists that didn't exist 2 years ago.
No, I'm not saying what you agree with. What I said was the information that you want to have made available.
That I would suggest in order to increase the confidence, if you want to, is that we can say we put everything up there. We
Well,
didn't just put one side of it.
But you also have said that you don't want us to promote COVID-19 and other vaccinations to increase vaccine confidence. You've said that in this meeting.
I don't think this is our job. Access
We are
is
not
one thing, promotion is another.
Yeah, we're not the marketing wing of Pfizer and Moderna. That's not the proper role of county government.
But
And
you-
it's concerning that we're continuing to see this in contracts going forward. And we've just talked to county commissioners from Marion County. They literally go through these contracts line by line and take stuff out that they don't want to be doing or be told to do or have money and strings attached to because of the heavy hand of OHA. So
Although I thought that was the case. And then Director Manfred said she checked with their Health and Human Services Director who said that never happened. But I spoke to Commissioner Willis, who's an attorney, who says that by nature, he goes through all of these things and he has in the past had concerns about some of the contracts. So while I don't have specifics about what those were, I'm going by what he told me.
Sure.
And that's why I thought perhaps, if they've done it, then what specifics? I don't have specifics other than he said they've gone through them and gone, no, we're not doing this. I don't know what that was.
Well, that's the nature of contracting 101, right? Parties look at the agreements, they decide what they are willing or unwilling to accept in the agreement, and then you negotiate. So we could certainly do something similar if the board working with HHS or had questions or had specific issues about these things, we can bring these questions to OHA. We can bring these concerns to OHA. Will they make a change? Will they agree to provide us with the funding if we make changes to specific program elements or to specific contract language? We won't know unless we have that discussion with them. They might say yes to some changes, they might say no to others, and then ultimately we'll be left with the decision of, okay, are we comfortable enough with the changes that have been made to move forward with accepting this money, or are we going to say, nope, we're not going to accept this money, recognizing the impacts then that will have on our ability to provide these services?
I think it's worth a try because as we've seen, we've got 3 governor candidates who don't have a lot of confidence in OHA. And, I certainly couldn't even get any information when state senators asked OHA for it. So I would say it's worth a try.
So I'll just remind the board, this is language that's already in the contract.
Mhm.
So this would not be something where we would be accepting new or different language. If you want us to try and go back and change that language, we would then be proposing our own amendment to change that particular program element language to OHA.
And the promotion of it is what is
Mhm.
is concerning to me. That's,
Yeah.
that's.
And we could continue to talk about what specific language changes you'd like. I can't tell you whether or not that amendment will be something that OHA is willing to accept or not. But it's something we could try. But as it stands today, this language is already in the contract. And this
Well-
contract, I believe, runs through June of next year.
Everything's negotiable, right?
Yeah, I would like to see what can be done about that kind of language in the contract. And what kind of money is specifically tied to promotion of the COVID-19 vaccine and addressing
Well, as
vaccine
Commissioner
confidence.
Cool has pointed out, it says promote COVID-19 and other vaccinations. So presumably it's related to all of the vaccination.
But I would like
vaccines
to
that are provided.
emphasize, having worked under many contracts and working with all the various contracts that we do have with the county. You have contract language, you have interpretation of certain sections or certain articles within a contract. The information that I provided from Director Manfred is the interpretation that we've made on that provision within the contract.
Yeah.
We have been operating under the current agreement that we have with OHA with that interpretation. We've yet to be challenged on that interpretation from OHA.
Mhm.
Not to say that, that usually triggers something, but I just want to say that what we're doing in our interpretation of the language thus far has passed muster and we have not been challenged on it, and we've been able to stay compliant with our contract. There's not proposed language to further get us into line or further clarify the interpretation on that contract or anything along those lines. And so
Yeah.
I again want to emphasize that, there's a lot of interpretation that goes into contracts and its discussions, and up to this point, we have not been challenged on how we've been rolling this
Oh,
out.
and to Ken's point, we will certainly have a much easier time if we try to interpret this language locally in a way that everyone is comfortable with, rather than going and asking OHA to change the language, right? If there is a way to resolve concerns through interpretation and increased discussion with, our HHS director, that will certainly be, I'm not going to say it's going to be easier, but it will be less complicated in the sense of not having to go back and ask them to amend something that we've already agreed to in previous amendments. So I think that Ken makes a great point. If there's a way that we can navigate these concerns locally and continue to have that conversation, that's probably likely to be more successful.
So where's the accountability piece on this? Because we've seen COVID vaccine percentages drop significantly. They've leveled out. They never went back up. Even though we're coming into the next season, we've seen booster rates, or I don't know what you call them, second, third shots, at significantly lower levels than the initial vaccine. So where's the accountability piece? What are we,
Are you asking, how are we being held accountable?
right, for spending
administrating,
money,
Immunizations by OHA?
right?
I
We're
mean,
being
it's
told,
in the contract.
right, well, we're not increasing anything. The numbers don't vet that out, that we're increasing. How do you measure increasing confidence? My assumption would be that you have more people who are vaccinated, but that's not happening. So where's the accountability? And I think this probably goes back to
It is.
the frustration with the,
Well, what we have in here is reporting, right? Is the method of accountability. If you're suggesting that we add another element of accountability where the OHA, that we add a language that the OHA shall hold us accountable if we haven't increased vaccination rates. We probably could put that in, but I don't think that you would want to.
And I don't know if compliance with this provision is necessarily viewed solely through the lens of higher or lower numbers.
Right.
Right. I
But
mean,
isn't that the
you
goal?
can be promoting, and when I say promoting, I'm using that in terms of educating and providing more information. And you may see numbers go up for COVID or other vaccinations, or you may see them flatten, or you may see them go down. So I don't believe that these are metrics that are purely driven by an increase in numbers, right? So if we don't have an increase in numbers, is OHA going to come and say you're out of compliance? That would best be a question answered by Director Manfred, but I don't believe that that's the case.
We have reporting requirements though.
But I
That's for
see the
sure.
concern.
Yeah.
I see the question that, well, if the numbers are going down, are we really succeeding in our obligation to promote?
Well, I think, we can sort of parse words, and I think words matter. And if the word promote is in here instead of educate, make, accept, make, available, then I think we have to give some weight to that word. And that might be something that we can discuss. Again, the only thing I would recommend at this point is that we add more of the newer data, CDC and Pfizer data, to our, here's the information. And then people, I think ethically, we could say, okay, we put it all out there. It's stuff that you can, will make it easy for you to see where it is and understand it. And then we can do this with confidence that we've told the whole story.
Well, I understand that we have tackled this with local interpretation. And that may be how this moves forward, but I do think that if we don't have some of these concerns addressed in terms of what is the information that we're making available to the public that we serve, we're going to continue to have this discussion. And we'll continue to have this frustration level. I mean, I just don't see how we keep going down this path, because the more time that passes, the more we see that there's risk, there's ethical issues, as Commissioner Starrett pointed out, and it needs to be addressed. So if we're not at the point where we want to strike or go back to negotiating the contract, then I will call for a motion to approve item H1.
Excuse me, Chair. Just
I'm
a-
glad we were
just a
looking
point
at each
of-
other.
Just a point of order, and I'm not sure that I'm hoping we can basically do what we did last time and not necessarily vote an up and down on this. Is that what you were going to ask for, an up and down vote on this? Or we were just going to, I would like to say, let's bring this back after we've had further discussion with Director Manfred about our individual concerns that we could share with her, and then come back with, again, the local interpretation of this. Because if it was a straight up and down vote, I would have voted no last time, and I would vote no now, because I think that this is, as the contract stands now, we haven't clarified anything, nothing's different. So I'm not prepared to vote on it.
Okay.
I mean, if we were going to vote on it, I'd vote no, and then that brings us back to we haven't fixed anything.
Well, Chair, I appreciate Commissioner Starrett's point. I would be ready to vote yes and have the conversation both at the Board of Health with Director Manfred, whether it's an open session or whether it's with Commissioner Starrett, about how we're meeting, what is it? Something sub F, I forget, of page 10. Because in my view, it's a programmatic thing versus the framework that we're approving right now when we are deciding locally the program.
Well, I don't know. I just feel like we keep having this argument over and over and over again. It's been 2 years, 2.5 years. So I guess at this point, I I would like further clarification on what that actually means. But I'd also like to explore what it looks like to remove those portions of the contract. I'm not talking about access, I'm talking about promotion. It feels like we're being paid to promote something that the majority of the board is not comfortable doing for ethical reasons or whatever. So it puts us in a pretty bad spot.
And are you speaking just of sub F? Or are you speaking of both page 15 and 10?
Well, I'm
All
speaking of,
immunizations?
no, I'm speaking of page F or subsection F on page 10.
And then, sorry, I don't know what the main one is. I just know it's sub F.
And it's specifically related to the COVID vaccine because I have not been, as long as I've been in office, we've not been asked to address vaccine hesitancy on anything else.
But we're not addressing vaccine hesitancy with this contract language.
But that's what that means, increase vaccine confidence.
You know, you can decide that that's what it means, but what the language that we've agreed to is the contractual language.
Well, then maybe we need to change it. That's my point.
You want
So
to change it
let's-
to vaccine hesitancy?
No, I'm saying, let's look at potentially removing that portion of the work that we're being asked to do. If OHA wants to come in and spend their own money and promote vaccines, and Lord knows how they do it, I don't know, but that's fine. But in
Chair, I
terms
don't
of the
really
role of
want
the county,
the OHA doing that here. Just like I want to say that for the record, I don't want the OHA to do the work that our local public health authority.
well, OHA
is
seems
doing.
to do what they want to do anyway, so I think OHA needs to be reined in a bit. But my point is that
But you just said it was okay with you if they just.
I
did
was
it.
being facetious.
Okay,
My
I just want to
point,
clarify.
my point is that if we have an issue with a particular line in this, in a particular section of this that we're being asked to do, that has nothing to do with access, really, then let's see if we can address it.
That would basically just be item F on page 10.
It's 8F is what I discovered. Of section
Page
43. I wish I could read things at smaller levels.
And then page 19. G sub 2 says we must implement 2 outreach activities designed to raise immunization rates.
Or G8F, yeah.
So it doesn't specifically say COVID. So
No, because this is under a section about immunization,
Immunization rates,
provision of
outreach.
immunizations.
right, so this one doesn't say
Mhm.
COVID, so I think it would be fair that this has been part of contract going on for years. So I'm not as concerned as I am about the promotion of COVID vaccines.
So just for sake of discussion, if under subsection F, for example, if we just removed the word COVID-19, promote vaccinations to increase vaccine confidence. Is
Again, I
that-
don't think that's our job, is to
Okay.
pimp for Pfizer. I think our job is to make these vaccinations accessible, and I think that to Chair Bershauer's point, if OHA wants to come in and beat the drum for COVID vaccine, mRNA vaccines, they can just go ahead and do it.
What I'm saying is we would remove the reference to COVID-19. It would just say promote vaccinations.
Again, promoting is different than providing access.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to clarify. So promoting vaccinations generally would still be of concern.
And do we promote or do we make?
Well,
accessible?
and that, like we've been talking about, it gets down to how you define promote, right? Does promote mean advocate for, or does promote mean provide access to and educate?
Well, I think we know what promote means. It has a definition and the definition is clear here. I mean, promote doesn't say make accessible.
And just, you know, to to further complicate it, on page 15, it's, we have agreed, I don't know how long, but for a long time, to do population-based services, including public education to increase vaccine confidence. So at least on page 15, they're defining promote as public education. If we're looking at parallel sentence structure, or at least one component is public education. That would be sub 1, paragraph 2 of page 15. So at least as the contract that we've agreed to many times interprets promote, at least one component is public education.
Well, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. If it was going to say promote, it would have said promote, but that's not what it says. And the other thing here is basically we're supposed to enforce school immunization requirements, and I've shown you that we've not been honest telling people about the exclusion option, the exemption option. So, you know.
And then Commissioner Starr, along those lines, can I ask Chair about that? So on the thing that you received, the letter, did it include information on how to access exemptions? When you received the letter,
I thought you were asking.
a vaccine
me,
exclusion letter, did it include how to access exemptions? And
I don't
mostly, I'm
recall. That was
asking
years
this
ago.
partly because I know that the information is on the website, but I don't
I
I
don't
don't
think
look
it
at
did
Facebook
because
posts for public health, so I
I
haven't
don't either,
looked.
but a lot of moms do.
Yeah,
this was back when Ben was in 4th grade, 5th grade. And I don't think it did because I thought he was not allowed to go to school.
Mhm,
He has some, but not all the vaccines.
mhm.
And then that's when I picked up the phone and said, what's going on here?
Yeah,
So whether they've changed the letter or not, I don't know. We can probably get our hands on one and see. But yeah, it's not clear.
Mhm.
It leads a parent to believe you can't send your kid to school, they're being punished.
yeah,
because
but I'm sorry, I wanted to
not.
clarify that before you went on.
Oh, no, just the Facebook, because a lot of folks do social media. I'm not a fan, but a lot of people and have shown me screenshots of this has been year after year after year after year. And they've made comments and they've asked for there to be clarification and none have been forthcoming. So that's the kind of thing is if we're going to be honest and increase confidence, that we need to be honest.
Mhm.
And I just want to clarify, just again, for the immunization page on the public health website, I'm looking at it right here.
Yeah.
The very top of it talks about Oregon state law requires that children in attendance at public schools and private schools, preschools, childcare facilities, and Head Start programs in Oregon receive certain immunizations or have appropriate exemptions in place, and it cites the OARs. There's also a flyer that's attached both in English and in Spanish. You open up the flyer down at the bottom of it. It gives instructions, it does talk about at what level and what age and the requirements, provides information at the bottom of the form. It says, let's see, exemptions are also available. Please check with your child's school, childcare, or healthcare provider for details. So that information's on the flyer. Further on our public health website, going back to that underneath that first statement that I read, there is a link to the OHA directly to exemptions and immunity and provides all the information. All of that information is readily available on our public health website under the immunizations.
Perfect, thank you.
Oh, and I think it's important to note that, and I appreciate that, because yes, it is, except that when you think about the numbers of people who will search out the public health website and go to that versus what they see pop up on Facebook. I've got 6 posts in 2022 that didn't mention an exemption. August 23rd didn't mention an exemption. It's not a one-off. This has happened and this is parents not getting the information. So if we're going to put stuff on our Facebook page, it's got to be accurate.
And based on the conversation that I have with Director Manfred, and we're fixing that.
That's what I'm hearing, yeah.
Okay, So it sounds like we're gonna,
Well, that's what I wanted, just to come back and clarify, if the board's not prepared to act on this agenda item today, are we first going to see if we can address these concerns through a clarification of how we're implementing these program elements? And see if we can accomplish that in such a way that we could come back and consider this amendment as written? Or are you asking that we also begin the conversation with OHA to amend the contract language?
I think as long as the word promote is in there, it's in there. That would be my first.
Okay.
Take a shot at that. I also think that it would be a really good idea for us to have continuing discussions with our Health and Human Services Director about, maybe beefing up our, the information, the relevant recent information that the CDC has out that we could add to our website. That would be what I would, in addition to.
It would be helpful for me to know what work wouldn't happen if we remove the language too. So that's a contractual versus
And
a program.
that's a program question, because
Yeah.
I can't answer that.
Yeah.
That would be
That's a good
Director
question.
Manfred would.
well, and this is
if it would
supplemental
change.
funding to the original contract.
Yeah, like most of the amendments have
Mhm.
been, they change some program
Mhm.
element language and they allocate additional funds to different program elements. This is an additional $68,000.
Mhm.
And given the frequency with which we see these amendments, it wouldn't surprise me if we're gonna be getting another one before too long. And that maybe by that time we'll have had some success with OHA. I don't know. Recent, efforts at getting them to make changes to contracts have been more challenging than they have been in the past, but
Have we tried it?
not with this particular program element, not that I'm aware of,
With
with this
any-
particular language. Yeah.
Anything?
Oh, yeah. Sure,
Well-
it happens with some frequency.
Well, maybe not, and I just want to clarify because, Director Manfred wasn't available, today because she's out of town. But, even if county council might not be directly involved with the contract negotiations on this, I do know that Lindsay and her team are actively engaged in having these conversations with
sure.
OHA.
Yeah.
And like Kristen shared earlier, there's, which I don't know the details on, but there's, at the network level and different groups, whether it's through AOC or some of the different public health groups, you all know more about some of the details on some of that than even I do. But, I just want to be careful that, because Lindsay does review all of these.
Yeah.
Lindsay does raise questions. She's not afraid to go back to the groups, go directly to OHA, raise these questions, raise concerns. If we think what we're doing requires an interpretation discussion, she will have those discussions with OHA. So, I mean, her and the public health team, work really hard to both implement the services that were required per statute and per our agreements with OHA to comply with our agreements and funding, but then to also comply with the policy direction that they are receiving from the board. So I just want to make it clear that we do review these agreements. It's not, and we try to look at all the language. We try to take it all in consideration, especially, as an example, we pour through some of the requirements because we're also keeping an eye out for some of the administrative burden, the reporting requirements, and some of these other things that comes with a lot of these contracts and agreements. That's just one example, but we do get into that and we do keep an eye on when the language that we're getting in the contract really does start getting down into the weeds to where they start dictating really the program elements and how we actually get into it. And we do push back and we do have those conversations. So, our public health team works really hard to implement and navigate the challenges around all of this and also with all the questions that come up as well.
They do work hard and they've had an awful big burden over the last couple of years. But ultimately, the local public health authority is the local governing body. And when we get contracts, the contracts come to the board for a reason. This is not to disparage anybody's work or anybody's efforts or anybody's intent. but we're the ones who have our names on those contracts. And there's a reason why they come to the governing body for approval.
Yeah, and I would like to add, there's kind of a breakdown on the memo, but it looks like almost $30,000 of this is public health practice immunization services, and then about 25,000 is community participation and assurance of access. So, you know, which kind of section are we talking about in terms of this supplemental amendment? In term, for, that relates to the funding part,
It is.
is it?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the same thing I just mentioned. Right. Right. But when we say promote COVID vaccine, you know, what is that? What part of those?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
the previous award balances here.
Mhm.
The $78,000.
The COAG funds?
That's a separate.
What does
item.
that mean?
Page-
COAG?
Page 45.
It would be great to have Director Manfred here to answer that question, and since I am not able to.
Program element 46, it looks like this is the first one we received money for. Community participation, assurance, and access. Looks like this is the first.
Mhm.
It must be. People who got it before.
On
Right.
which line?
That would probably be something.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we do a work session. Maybe we, you know, we had a good discussion and on Wednesday and, you know, did some sort of back and forth. We still come to the same impasse. But I do want to respect her knowledge. I mean, really the deep knowledge of all these contracts because
Mhm.
she's worked with them for so many years. I appreciate that. So yeah, I don't think we can have any meaningful conversation going forward without, you know, having the director join us.
Okay. So. Rather than sort of throw out some dates, why don't we just have a conversation with her and see when she might be available for coming on?
Even if it was an additional meeting or additional work session type of, I don't know.
But just to clarify, because where we're at is based on the direction, it sounded like a majority of the board wanted staff to go back to OHA and get some clarification on specific language within the contract.
Yeah, I think that's something that probably a majority of the board needs to hear the OHA before we have a work session with Director Manfred.
I'm just trying to make sure that I understand where we're at and what's being requested, because or is the request to again have this discussion
Before we do that, or they proceed on parallel tracks.
I heard Commissioner Starrett say that 8F was unacceptable to her.
Right.
As it currently stands.
That's what I heard too, as long as the word promotion was in there.
Well, I get that, but I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand because there was the conversation about scheduling a work session and in the interests of trying to figure out what's going to be discussed at that work session.
Mm.
Because if the concerns around getting clarification under the contract, we can proceed with doing that. And then when we get that response back from OHA, you know, then at that point, we'd be ready to have that further discussion. Or if this is a discussion that, you know, depending on what action is taken, and if there's going to be a future discussion about certain program elements and how we implement that, maybe that would be more worthwhile for a later work session to have. If there's questions around that, I'm trying to chart a path forward. And making sure that we have clear direction on what we're preparing.
I have a question
Mhm.
for Christian. Christian, in sort of the legal world, when you're talking about a contract and there's a word in there, usually you've got a sort of a glossary of what definitions of different things are. But in this case, how does it work when you've got a contract and you have a word that maybe isn't defined or called out in a glossary? So going to OHA and asking them to define promote, or do we just Google what's the definition of promote? And then how does that factor into a legal document?
I don't know that we have enough time to talk about
And I
how,
would say that.
how
I think
contract language interpretation works. It isn't a defined term as far as I know. And my understanding was that the goal would be to remove the term, not necessarily define it, but we could try to define it in such a way that might also help clarify the question too.
And I would just kind of come back to, we've chosen to define it as, public health and the HHS department have chosen to define it in a certain way, and it's been working, and OHA hasn't challenged us on that. And I think that was the concern I was hearing expressed in Ken's thought was, but if we are opening that up, then maybe OHA decides that the way that we have been doing it isn't appropriate. But as of right now, they're deciding it's appropriate, that it meets the definitions for them. I don't know who them is though. I'm sorry.
So just to clarify, Christian, that says this program element number 1 is hereby superseded and replaced as follows, and then it goes through the language.
Right. And I looked
So-
at the end and it doesn't look like we're actually adding any funding to program element 1 under this amendment.
That's what I was seeing too.
Okay. But I haven't not looked at the original contract, but we're certain that this language promote COVID-19 and other vaccinations to increase vaccine confidence is in the original one.
I was looking at the amendments as the board was talking, and it's at least in the most recent amendment prior to this one, Amendment 8. I'd have to go back. I didn't make it all the way back through. There are some amendments where they don't redefine program elements, but I didn't have a chance to get all the way back to the original agreement.
Okay.
But I can tell you that it is at least in
The
amendment number
most
8.
recent one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it looks like the current award balance for program element number 1 is just under $129,000.
So clear as mud. We have direction what to do next. Okay. So we will just simply continue this item for a later date.
I think so.
All right, any further comment or discussion or concerns on that? Okay. Moving on to butterflies.
Poor Mark.
Item I, other business. Item I1 is consideration of approval and submission of the 2022 Habitat Conservation Plan Annual Compliance Report. And we are joined by Mark Lago if there's any questions. But this is our annual report on the Fender's blue butterfly and the Kincaid's lupin. that we
I have
are
a
required.
question.
Okay.
And Mark, I was looking at that because I remember being here when that was all put together and going out on one of the actual tours of the habitat locations with Public Works. And the question I have is looking at the report, it looks like in a number of areas, there's not a lot of, there haven't been sightings or counting of a lot of additional butterflies, and sometimes you're seeing none. How does that impact what we do?
Well, part of the goal is to actually have the plants, a lupin as well, in case the population of the butterfly come back. And this year there was, because we had such a cold and damp, summer, it was a lot later for these butterflies to come out, and they were actually going to higher elevations as well as the sunny areas, so south sides. So we're still actually providing the opportunity for these butterflies to get to the plants. That's also part of the HCP.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions?
No, Chair, I'm just that, I think I appreciate the work that Director Lago and the team is doing around you know, just what you said, which is to make sure that there is habitat there and that we manage it appropriately while not overly burdening the management of everything else. So
Thank
I think
you.
you've been doing a great job of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it. Thanks for sitting through all this.
Yeah,
Chair, I would move that we approve item I1.
thank you. Commissioner Kula moves approval. Is there further discussion?
No, Chair.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I2 is consideration of approval in the matter of amending Board Order 22-304 to remove tax lot number R4401-03800 from the tax foreclosed property auction list. And I believe Jody has briefed all of us.
I think
Okay.
so. We've identified an opportunity that if we can agree that some language in some deeds can be interpreted a particular way, this may be a piece of property that we could sell back to a prior owner. So we're doing that work now, but for the time being, we're going to pull it off the auction list. If that doesn't come to fruition, then this is a piece of property that could be added to the
Okay.
next auction list.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah, that
Thank
makes
you for
sense.
that. Yeah.
I will move approval of item I2. Any further discussion?
No, Chair.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I3, consideration of approval of a resolution in the matter of opposing ballot measure 114, and this was added by Commissioner Starrett. So I'll let you kind of kick us off here.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to the concerns that this poses for law-abiding gun owners or would-be gun owners, I think that it's important for us to remember how this would impact our sheriff's office and the budget. And what's been really interesting to see is this has been one of those things that has been opposed by virtually every political persuasion. Met with on a meeting with a gentleman from the Progressive Gun Owners Group and the Socialist Rifle Group and you know, groups that have, you know, more gun owner type of cachet. And everybody seems to think that for one reason or another, whether it's the bias that could happen from a police officer saying, I want more information from you, specific person, so that I can determine whether you can get in line for permit, or whether a rape victim or domestic violence victim now has to have her information published, even if it was, you know, unpublished at the time. These are all concerns that absolutely go across every party line. So to see the whole, and then the fact that we're looking at $40 million to sheriff's offices, it's a lot for law enforcement to try to manage. Plus it's, you know, just the unconstitutionality of it. So I have grave concerns about what it means for us, for our domestic violence victims, and for the bias that could happen in people trying to access firearm.
Yeah, this fascinates me how there's a significant effort in this state to reduce sentencing and reform, quote unquote, reform the criminal justice system. Yet at the same time, there's also an effort to erode our right to self-defense. It doesn't work out well in the end when you go down that dual track. As you noted, the OSSA, the Sheriff's Association, is formally opposing this measure because of not only the financial impact to them, but also because of the things that are happening elsewhere in the system. One instance, and I just talked to the sheriff about this week, is the sex offender registry list, right? That's supposed to be done by the Oregon State Police. Well, because of COVID and other things, they don't have time and they don't have the resources to do it. So we now have a significant number. I was told privately close to half of the sex offenders in the state are not actually on a registry. And OSP is asking sheriffs to pick up the responsibility of doing that. they don't have the resources to do it. It takes hours to register someone. So this is a problem of these, we've talked about unfunded mandates quite a bit, but this ballot measure is just, you can't do both. You cannot try and reform and reduce sentencing and have people and underfund mental health services and addiction treatment services, and then take a blunt instrument to our Second Amendment rights and the rights of lawfully abiding citizens to protect themselves and their right to self-defense. Doesn't work. So I thank you for bringing this forward, and I will be voting yes.
Thank you.
Do you want to move approval?
Well, I was gonna say,
Commissioner
I'm
Cooler
happy
has
to,
comments.
it's funny, I like it when you and I agree about things that traditionally we don't agree about. But this is one case where I'm also opposed to measure 114, and you had laid out some of the reasons. And I think you're right that there are, well, I have heard the same thing that you have heard about particular groups having a particular thing that they don't like in it, that for them is irreconcilable, right?
Mhm.
And they're like, no, on this. And maybe for some people, other things are okay, but there's like a no here or a no there. I spoke with a friend from the coast who called it a poor people's tax because of the training requirement,
Right.
which you allude to in the resolution. But I thought that was an interesting one. So for them, it was like, that was the thing that was wrong with it. As I read the resolution, because there are statements in there that I don't have like a reference to a specific part of the measure. I apologize that I'm uncomfortable with signing on to it. And yet at the same time, I'm in a position where I also oppose measure 114. So with apologies, I'll be voting no.
Understood.
And I feel silly, but that's just.
I have the measure here if you wanted to read it. Because everything is related to it's a very long measure.
Mhm.
And if you look in the voters pamphlet at the arguments in favor and the arguments in opposition, but I have the actual, the text of of measure 114 here. So everything is, relatable to it. But if, again, it's understandable if you're not comfortable signing on to it.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess it's like the opening preamble, and it's not the preamble, the opening whereas says essentially it ends the sale of all firearms and bans the sale of most shotguns. And so to me, I'm like, that's different than my understanding of the measure. And again, bearing in mind that I disagree with the measure. And so I'm uncomfortable signing on to something that I don't necessarily, maybe I just need to spend more time with the measure. There are parts that I disagree with. And so I've been like, okay, well, that's it.
Yeah, because some shotguns contain, just the capacity and the youth sporting events that won't happen as a result of not even being able to use these firearms because of the magazine capacity. That's what makes them, or they have to be dismantled to be transferred to the range for these kids. And that's kind of sad, especially when we see the 4-H these guys in the shooting sports. So yeah, it's too onerous, but I appreciate your comments.
I mean, it's kind of funny because I just like, well, there's this and there's this, and I don't know if it's actually true that it ends all gun sales, but it says essentially ends all gun sales. And I would say, yes, obviously it's true that it ends all gun sales if you don't have a permit. Right. So for some people, it just will end all gun sales for them.
Right. And standard capacity on guns that are sold now are way over 10 rounds.
Mhm.
So what happens to those guns and those magazines? I
Right.
mean, so can you buy it? Well, not really.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
so
No, I appreciate you bringing it forward, and with respect, I'll be voting no.
thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. Well, I appreciate that you understand the concerns.
Yeah.
Don't really have any political affiliation.
I wanted to support it, and then I started reading it, and I started listening to other people, and I realized that it wasn't something that I could support.
Okay, you listen to the wrong people. Anyway, thank you for those comments. I appreciate it.
Clearly, I listened to enough of the right people.
Yeah, true. Anyway, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
So do I have to read this? Is this something we need to read, or can I just move approval of it?
That has been the past practice of the board, is to read the resolutions into the record, but there's no requirement that says you have
I
to.
was gonna say, come on, there's a comma in there.
I will
It's
leave
up
it
to
to
the
up
board.
to the chair.
Well, would you like to move approval?
Yes, I would move approval of item I3, approval of the resolution in the matter of opposing ballot measure 114.
Okay. I'll leave it up to you if you would like to read all of it. It's,
I
Lengthy.
think looking at the late time, if I did, it would incur the ire of my colleagues. And I think
We need
it's,
to get that computer voice. right?
it's, yeah, I mean, I can read it really fast, but
Can
I
hear my
think at this
stomach.
point.
It's in the record.
It's in the record, you've read it.
Okay.
And if you want to read it, I'd be happy to bring a copy to your house. So anyhow, so I'm going to,
We heard that.
all right.
okay.
Okay, so Commissioner Starrett moves approval. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Thank
Feels
you.
funny, but
Let the record show Commissioner Starrett and Commissioner Burschauer voted in the affirmative and Commissioner Kula voted in the negative. Thank you.
and I think that this serves, I was thinking about kind of the purpose of this and even our conversation to me serves to provide more information to people. Like there's the clause about that fails to communicate that we already have a background check system.
Mhm.
And so I think having the conversation is part of that, is educating people about what we do have right now.
Mhm.
True. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Imperfect though it may be. See?
Item I4 is consideration of approval of the modification to the agreement between Yamhill County and Summit Strategies Government Affairs LLC for consulting services in the amount of $125,400 retroactive to July 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2023. Do I have a motion to approve?
Chair, I'd move that we approve item I4.
Commissioner Kula moves approval. Is there discussion or questions on this?
No, Chair.
No? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. That brings us to item J, public hearing. We have nothing this week, and item K, announcements. Commissioners, any announcements?
I just have a very brief one. I just want to let you know that I'll be in Bend for I think it's called the Oregon Summit, but it's the Oregon Infrastructure and Brownfield Summit, which is really like everybody who has brownfields and is looking to have help from the state around them and drinking water systems. And I'm just going to be talking about the state of drinking water and water here in the county so that people are more interested in the technical assistance that's also being offered. So I'll be there just for a panel, but I thought I'd let you know.
And if you could share back when you come back as to,
Yes,
The
I'm only
discussion.
there for that one panel, but what I'll do is I'll share the slides from that one with you.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Are you hearing that, because Abishab touched on it briefly, but the concern over the private brownfield grant issues?
A little bit, but
Okay. Well, she said, and I asked what Business Oregon's response was.
Mhm.
Are they gonna try and go back to the legislature maybe?
right, and extend it or.
Extend it?
Mhm.
And she said, well, they didn't really say much, so. I
It
don't
feels
know
like
if
it's
that's
really
something-
important because as you know, there's properties here in our community that
Mhm.
otherwise can't be cleaned up.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I do want to bring up that Senator Boquist has asked us, and there's a deadline coming up Monday. We put it on the website. I think Carolina put it on the website or a link to it. Basically, the Wildfire Program Advisory Council to assist the state wildfire program director per Senate Bill 762. They're looking for people to be on the advisory council. So that is on the website. And if people want to just apply so that we have some representation. And the deadline is October 24th at 5 p.m. But this is, I believe, in the packet as well. Or maybe it's just on the website.
I didn't see it on the packet, but I see
It's
it
not on the
website.
packet.
Yeah.
So not sure. So is it on the, okay, Yeah, it's really a short turnaround, but we just got it. So, and the other thing is I wanted to update a couple of things, Housing Authority. The Willamina property that the Housing Authority was looking at, they're not going to have the capacity right now because of staff constraints so they're going to basically say, hey, if you guys can find another another social benefit option for this, we can't handle it right now. So I think that's exciting in a way that we have another opportunity, but and if we can't, then they'll look at it down the road.
Great.
And then also to go back to the issue with Ms. Edwards that we're all looking at, they have, Vicky at the Housing Authority has worked diligently with the contractors board and they've got their attorney looking at various issues. It's too complicated to go into, but Ms. Edwards will be joining us at the Housing Authority Board to make public comment on Tuesday. And they're working on some other issues because it's gotten very complicated. I'll leave it there. The other thing is that the George Health Policy Center folks did come into town to meet with us at the CCO regarding our community prevention and wellness. They're all looking for money and they all think that ARPA dollars are going to be the answer. And I didn't want to disappoint them. A lot of it's been committed. So anyway, that's just our short update.
Thank you.
I touched a little bit on update from the sheriff this week. As you know, ODOT has given us a grant for a deputy that's focused solely on DUII. And that deputy has been so successful. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but has been so successful.
Let's think of it as success.
Yeah.
That they actually want to fund another one,
Oh, good.
number 2, for 3 years. So he's looking at that.
Because it
And
was
I-
just 1 year for one, correct? Wasn't it?
No, it's a multi-year
It was,
contract.
okay. I was
but
worried about
that's-
the shortness of it.
Yeah, and that's all that deputy does.
Right.
I asked him, what's the nature of these folks that he's pulling over? Is it alcohol? Is it other, prescription drugs? What is it? And he said it's just majority alcohol. And that there's really no time of day. It's just kind of at all hours of the day and, a good mix of local people and then also out of county people coming in. So not really any sort of, line of concern based on the data that we have, other than that deputy is busy enough to where we need a second one. So, body
It's like we have
cameras.
Oh, no, I was just thinking we used to have the safety corridor on 18.
Yes.
It's kind of like a version of that we're getting the money from ODOT to do this, essentially a safety corridor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
And sorry, and then we also had money a few years through the distracted driver task force. We got some money for a texting while driving grant, and they were pulling people over left and right for just texting. And then that went away. And it's too bad because you see a lot of cross center line things, and that is implicated in a lot. We've had a lot of those here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the sheriff's office has been busy. We talked a little bit on the break about the marijuana bust. Largest in history, happened in Newburgh. Clearly, the cartel was involved in some ways. And I think it's kind of shocking. I don't think people understand that this is happening in literally in their backyard. And so numerous implications, right? Not just the safety of these individuals who are being sort of forced into this, but the impact on our legal businesses that are involved in this, the impact on water resources. Apparently these folks were, using a lot of water that they probably shouldn't have.
Oh,
been.
this newest. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so just things you don't really think about, but these are happening all over the place and they're happening, in our backyard. So the other thing we talked about was the body cameras. So they are moving forward with that. So that should be rolling out in January timeframe. So that's good. I talked a little bit about the sex offender registry issue. And he did emphasize that the the sex offenders who are considered predatory, which would be sort of your higher level offenders, are making it on the list. It's the rest of the folks that they consider not predatory, but in the past have been on the list. So I just want to caution there. And then I think that's about it. Our incarceration levels are down. We kind of expected those to go back up after COVID. The precautions were lifted, but they are staying low.
Interesting.
So interesting
Even
statistic
with
there.
the difference in the pretrial
Mhm.
detention.
So that's the update from the sheriff this week. You heard from Abisha. That was my other big meeting this week. So.
Yeah.
Ken, Christian, any updates?
It looks like it's soccer
Soccer.
related. Yeah, thank you. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that involves setting at least the first public hearing. You have to hold 2 public hearings for 30 to 50 days.
Mhm.
And we're targeting December 1st as the first public hearing and January 12th. That's the second. So there will be a change in the board in the midst of that, which for timing purposes.
Right.
But that's sort of the city was active. And we're required to take the first initial step.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Wonderful.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Carolina.
Okay, if there's
you.
nothing else at the good of the order, I will adjourn the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for October 20th, 2022. And